Welcome to Speak Sex. I'm your host, Eurydice, and I'm in Miami Pride Month with today's guest. I have my friend and co-writer Farah and her friend Rosen, um, who are both writers, poets, activists, in in and queer activists as well as writers. Um, so I know that Farah has been working with Reading Queer. She they we're gonna talk about pronouns. So by by the end of this conversation, I will say everything in a respectful and inclusive way. Um, and what I find interesting about this topic is that I have felt this way emotionally for a long time, for decades, long before uh, you know sisters and brothers began to come up with a way to ask to be addressed. But it didn't occur to me way back when that I could actually involve others and the overall consciousness in this feeling that I had. So I have always felt that I'm not an I. I have always felt that I am a we, and that the is patriarchy immediately from the very genesis, limiting, right, and defining um, my consciousness, my identities. It didn't occur to me to say our identities and their identities. And today, Rosen is going to talk to us a little bit about Zir, and Zirs, which I feel is even more interesting and exciting. But back to my introduction, I'd like you each to speak of your work, for a minute, if you can. Farah Yemini is a graduate, right, of the MFA at FAU, and she he they um, are mentoring the SoFlo South Florida protest poets group that Rosen is a member of. I believe that Rosen also is a member of Rainbow Rights PAC, or maybe has founded Rainbow Rights PAC. So, their approach to poetry is in the form of activism, which I admire and appreciate, in the form of protest, whether it's spoken poetry or performed poetry, written poetry. It includes always, this intentional consciousness of the fight for social justice and inclusion. So, welcome to the show, Farah and Rosen. And I would like to open the conversation to this, sharing about this practice of actively changing our use of the language and therefore our consciousness by asking those around us to address us in non-conventional, non-patriarchal ways. And I totally feel that transformation starts with language, and I know how difficult that is, because there is an endless process of translation as we try to communicate with each other, and we hardly, right, know ourselves, since we constantly are in flow and change, and then guessing the right words to try and share that with another, guessing the vocabulary that the other will be familiar with, and open to, accepting and sharing is already kind of a leap of faith. And in the process, asking to adjust, to kind of like expand, the vocabulary to include us more authentically, makes it even more of a kind of like, brave task, I feel. So yeah, I would love to hear what you have to say about it.
So am I going first?
Sure.
Or I guess, yeah. Really, I really like what you have to say about language as like an emancipatory act, as it's an action of how we can relate to each other, as we translate our consciousness and how I want my friends, how I want my community to see me, right? There's nothing more intimate than using the right language, because that it's like an agreement. My message is received on the other side, that this person is seeing me in this way that I want to be seen, And so I really like how pronouns and how language, like just my language work, right? It's like my language movement, cultural work, how it, everything that it can do, right? Like you said, it can expand us. And I thought, like, in the beginning, I felt like I was a pain in the ass, and I still do. Like, I don't think that goes away. When you ask people to expand themselves, it's always, uncomfortable, because we live in the patriarchy, and it's invested in seeing this binary in a certain way, right? And we're like altering that, and we're expanding that and growing that. And so I used to thought, like, I used to think I was the big shit, because I would, use they, them pronouns, and people were like, well, I read you as a woman, so I'm going to call you she. I'd be like, all right, so I know our relationship then, right? Like, our relationship is how you want to see me and not how I'm asking you to see me. And so that's also like, it's also like a litmus test, it's like, are you on this path with me, or are you not? Like, and so I know who I can count on and who are my people. But then I met Rosen, and Rosen was like a whole new like curve to it. And when Z first, when I heard them really talk and own that space of why they use these or zers as their preferred pronouns and as their pronouns, I was like really impressed. And I just want to like, invite them to talk to me a little about it. I first heard them speaking on a panel called Queer Black Experiences, about, the pronouns. When they first told me, it was just like, I was like, okay, I got you. Like, I'm going to start using Zer and Zers. But when I really heard it, it also felt powerful and intimate at the same time, which I think is what
the
patriarchy is trying to like keep us from connecting in this like genuine, authentic way.
And I love that. I love that. I just want to take this a moment to just kind of digest that. Because I feel that, superficially, someone who's not familiar would experience it as alienating. Why can't you just be like me? Right? But it does, in fact, involve a lot of intimacy. The intimacy, like linguistic intimacy, and trust. It's a gesture of trust that can be misread. If one doesn't take a moment and listen. Because it's easier to fit in. It's not that hard to say, I'm a trans man or something that is understandable and then get to the point, whatever the point is. But then that's how we get, capitalized and commodified and put in our little categories and don't have a chance to speak for ourselves and discover ourselves until we're like way deep in that kind of like conveyor belt feed. so to actually express yourself and share yourself in a way that stops the automatic talk, right, and forces us to come from our consciousness. I feel is so enriching and powerful and inclusive. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
For that.
Of course. Thank you for just like setting the stage for this. And I would love to hear, Ro talk a little bit about their pronouns, about Zer's pronouns.
Yes. So start. Yes. So pronouns. So yeah, so we saw like what pronouns are. So a lot of people refer to them as gender pronouns, but I lean away from calling them gender pronouns. I just refer to them as pronouns because it's not as simple as, oh, you have a gender and you have to go by certain pronouns. That's not true. And like a lot of times when people try to teach pronouns for the first time, they oversimplify it, and when they oversimplify, you end up erasing a lot of people's experiences. So how to explain pronouns, there are shorter ways to refer to someone. And like not everybody has pronouns, but most people go by certain pronouns or by any pronouns. So conventionally, women can be associated with the pronoun she, her, and men can be associated with the pronoun he, him. But that's not always true. There are some women say they're gender non-conforming, especially they're masculine. Some of them, especially I've seen like butch lesbians, various lesbians who go by who still identify as women, but go by other pronouns. Like maybe they go by they, them. Maybe he goes by he, him. But meanwhile, they still identify as women. That's possible. And then men say they're more feminine presenting, or especially gay men, but they still identify as men, and they may go by they, them. Or maybe she goes by she, her. So those are men and women. And then there are non-binary people. So people who are not always completely or exclusively men or women, they're non-binary. And like non-binary people also go by any pronoun. So the most common pronoun, of course, that some people have heard of, but more often referred to is like they, them. But non-binary people don't have to go by they, them. Some non-binary people go by she, her. Some go by he, him. Some mixed pronouns. Some people say go by he and they. Some go by she, he, and they. Some go by any pronoun. Like they're fine with any pronoun. And then there are people who don't go by any pronouns. Like whether they're questioning or maybe there's not a pronoun that feels right to them, so they just want to be called their name. Or next is the person's name. Say the person's name is Stan. Stan wants to be called Stan. You wouldn't call Stan they or he or she. You'd say Stan. This is my friend Stan. Stan is sitting in the chair. The chair belongs to Stan, and you just use Stan's pronouns. So for me, my pronoun is he, the, and theirs. Those are my pronouns.
Right, and that's ZHI or ZHIR, right?
Well, how I personally spell it, like ZHE, I spell Zer, ZHIR, and I spell Zers, ZHIRS.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I personally spell it. And of course, I like to say I pronoun cousins, because there are people with similar pronouns, but they spell it kind of differently. Like maybe they spell it out in H. Like some people will spell it Z-E, for example, or they may spell it S-E. And like, so there are different ways depending on the person. So I'm speaking for myself. I spell it Z-H-E for Z.
Mm.
So how I came across my pronouns, this is like back in like the second half of ninth grade. Let me go, second half of ninth grade. This is at that time I met for the first time in my life 2 gender fluid people. And like that, they really opened my mind and turned like, oh wow, you don't have to be a man or a woman. There are other options. And not say it's a choice, but like there are other genders that you can identify as besides a man and a woman. And then so then I realized as I got on social media, that like I read people's experiences, I was like, wow, I relate a lot to this. And I started identifying as gender fluid, and I was go looking through pronouns, like look through a list of pronouns, see what feels right for me. And I saw Z and Zer, and it hit right. It just hit right. And I was like reading about it. It's not super common, but in some instances, like in Britain, they'll use she and their on legal documents. So they'll be like, instead of being like she/he, or instead of being like parentheses S/he, like the US does,
Right.
in some cases, they'll be like Z after they use exclusive. And like, I remember talking to a friend who I haven't written, and I mentioned that, and she was like, yeah, she had seen it before, but she never knew that was why they used it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's how I came across the pronouns, and I adopted those pronouns, and like, they feel right. Sometimes people ask me, why don't you just use they, them? That's just so much easier. That's so much simpler. But at the end of the day, it's like you use pronouns that affirm your gender. So like, when people call me they, them, it's like, it's not like I'm offended unless of course they're doing it because they're just purposely disrespecting my pronouns. But it's like it doesn't feel right. I don't really feel like necessarily you're talking about me. When you use they and they, it's like, yes, you're talking about me. Like if you call me she, that really hurts my soul, because like I know you, like, especially because I make it very clear that when I meet someone, like, these are my pronouns, they and they. And you call me she, like, no, that's hurtful. Especially growing up, that's what I was called, and like that doesn't feel right. If you call me he, that still doesn't feel right. It doesn't make me feel as gross, but it still don't feel like you're talking about me. And then they, I'll accept they only if you don't know my pronouns. Like say, like you're referring to me and you don't know me, that's different. But like if once you start talking to me, I introduce myself, hey, I'm Rosen, my pronouns are ze and der, I'm expected to use ze and der. So I'm not like this unknown person where like you're using they because you don't know me. Of course, some people use they as their pronoun set, and that's okay. But if someone does not use they with their pronoun set, and you actually know them, you shouldn't be calling them they. And that's what some people do. And at one point in time, I got into that habit of just calling everyone they. But actually coming across other trans people really asserting their pronouns, that really made me more confident. Like some trans women who go by he and trans women who go by she, they're really insistent. Call me she, call me he, do not call me they. And it's like, wow, I can actually insist on my pronouns. I can be like, call me Z. Like I used to be like, oh yeah, you can, like I'll be like Z and Zer. My pronouns would be like, oh, can I just call you they? And I'll be like, okay, yeah. And like pretend I'm okay with it. But like, no. Now I'm like, no, these are my pronouns, Z and Zer, and you need to call me accordingly.
Yeah. I mean, I have to tell you, I love it. I just simply love it. Because I think it's an active participation in the creation of the language. So instead of a passive, right, use of the language for transactional purposes, it's an intervention, and I can imagine a world where we all each had our own, and how fun and creative and exciting and unique that would be, and how much just that one simple hack, that one simple tweak in the way we speak would change the language completely and thoroughly. How many new words, sounds, meanings would be added to our daily speech if we each had a pronoun that we felt was appropriate and expressed our truth. So yeah, I love it. And Rosen, could you speak to us a bit about your identity? I know you're asexual, right? And you are also a romantic, or yes? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about my orientation specifically, or also my gender?
Everything you wanna share in as concrete a way as you can at this moment. Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'll start with my gender and then go into my orientation. But they're related to me. Some people, they're separate, but for me, they are saying that they're related to an extent. So my gender currently, I'll start with being general and then go to more specific. So in daily life, especially when I'm interacting with cis people, cis meaning people who aren't trans. So they're assigned the gender at birth and they identify with that gender only, always, and completely. Mm-hmm. So they, especially those who are not familiar with the LGBTQI+ community, I usually just tell them I'm a non-binary trans man. That's like me being general.
Yes.
And this is, I'm not offended that anybody calls me that, because that's just, I identify with those terms, non-binary trans man. If I'm being specific, especially if in the trans community, especially other non-binary people, I say I'm a poor flux man adjacent. So what that means, a poor gender, a poor gender. So that's APORAGENDER, a poor gender.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that's not a man or a woman, but it still has a feeling. So it's not the same thing as agender. So agender, AGENDER, that's like a lack of gender or not having a gender.
Yes.
That's what agender is. But it's not agender. It's still having a gendered feeling or inclination, but just not a man or a woman.
Yeah.
So when I say
apora in Greek means faint. Not the opposite of like firm. Yeah. Go ahead. Apora gender.
And so the prefix apora and then the suffix flux. So flux is like as in fluctuate, like the intensity of gender fluctuates. So when I'm saying apora flux, that means that apora, a gender that's not a man or a woman, like that intensity of it changes. So that's what apora flux is. And then I say man adjacent. And interestingly enough, I remember I was filling out the non-binary, there's a gender non-binary survey that goes out every year. That a non-binary person does. It's called the non-binary census or something like that. So I was filling it out, and then it was asking, like, how would you describe your gender in words? And then I think of the word non-adjacent, and I was like, is that a thing? Because I'm like, is that something I'm making up, or is that like something that's established? And you have to say, even if you're the one coming up with the term, that's still as valid as if other people came up with it or it's been around for a long time. So I'm looking up, specifically I said gay man adjacent, because I really related to experiences of gay men specifically, as opposed to like straight men. So when I was looking up like gay man adjacent, I mostly saw it in people using it more as a joke, like straight men who were like maybe more feminine or like gender non-conforming, or even like taking on roles that are considered for women, like gender roles, like say like to cook, like say they like to cook and things like that, and like basically using it in terms of gender roles. But I was like reclaiming it, and like not in terms of like gender roles, but in like terms, but like my experiences of gender really me connecting more to gay men as opposed to like straight men in my experiences. So I put gay men adjacent, even though that my internet search didn't come up with the results I was hoping. But I was like, you know what, I'm gonna use this term, and even if other people are using it as a joke, I can use it for my identity. That's the first time I ever used it. And then after that, I thought about it some, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make that like, no, I'm gonna use it for myself, like man adjacent. So I say adjacent, as in like I don't completely identify as a guy, but I feel like I'm like partially do or like close there. That's why I say adjacent. So like the gender, if I'm being specific, as I said, it's a poor flux man adjacent. And that's when I'm being specific. In terms of like being general, when I say I'm a non-binary trans man, I actually have another friend. He identifies as a non-binary trans man or a genderqueer trans man, and so I'm not sure. The genderqueer, for some people use non-binary and genderqueer interchangeably, but that's not the case for everybody. Because I identify as non-binary, but not as genderqueer. So some people take on genderqueer, like when other gender labels don't feel quite right for them, like they feel like genderqueer fits. So some people use it to mean gender non-conforming. Some people mean it to mean you can be cis and genderqueer, you cisgender, or you can be non-binary.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, he has both non-binary and genderqueer as well as trans man. And I remember for a long time, I'd be like, wow, I wish I was a guy. I wish I was a trans guy. And I thought I had those thoughts because, I just want more privilege. As a non-binary person, there's a lot of pressure that goes with it. And I thought maybe that's why I had those thoughts. But I never asked until I finally asked myself, wait, what if you are a guy? And I was like, wait a minute. I never thought to ask myself, hey, what if you're a guy? It's like, and a big part, like being non-binary is just a big part of my identity. And it's like, I don't have to leave my identity as being non-binary to also identify as a guy. I can identify as both.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what it means. Non-binary. That you can do that. And that's the beauty of it. Yeah.
So before I go into orientation, do you want to talk about your gender, Farah?
Yeah, I felt that. Yeah, let's talk about your orientation, if we can, for a minute, where you're at right now in your journey.
Okay, yeah, I think I can
wait, bro. You can go. Yeah.
Okay. So my orientation, and again, so I definitely contextually, whether I'm being general or if I'm being specific. So if I'm being general, I usually say I'm gay because, like, the overarching term being gay, as in I'm not straight. But it's like a specific, I say I'm omni, aromantic, asexual. So what do these terms mean? So some people get confused, especially because omni is like what's actually what omni is. So omni is like attraction to all genders, but still having gender is still a factor in your attraction. So in my case, I tend to be into men and non-binary people the most often. I can be into women, but just not as often. So that's why I go by. So then people are like, wait, how are you attracted to all genders and then asexual and aromantic? So how I explain it to them is that there's so many different forms of attraction. So even though I lack sexual attraction in terms of asexual and lack romantic attraction in terms of aromantic, I still can feel other attractions, like aesthetic, like the visual appearance. And then there's also attraction. Altruist is like an emotional closeness. It's not romantic or platonic, but it's still like a significant, like emotional, like connection or emotional bond. So I tend to feel aesthetic attractions the most often, and like for me, that's important to my identity. So specifically, omni, aromantic, asexual, and I recently added the term homoflexible to my identity. So the same friend I was talking about, I make a joke that I like stole his identity, but like he identifies as a homoflexible, non-binary trans man. And I was like, and there's like, and even though I've known him since like high school, and I'm like first year in college now, and it's like, it's literally just now occurring to me, it's like, hey, I can identify like this too. It's interesting enough. So like in my case, when I say homosexual, so I feel like that's specific. So that helps describe like my omni orientation. So like an omni person, who they're more attracted to depends. So not another person that is omni. They may be into women more often. They may be into non-binary people more often. They may be into women and non-binary people more often. So like it depends on which omni person. So what we have in common is all genders, and then which gender we're into more often is what varies. So when I say I'm homoflexible, so HOMOFLIBLE, homoflexible. That's since I'm non-binary trans man. In my case, like the homo part, like being attracted to men and non-binary people the most often, and flexible part, I can still be into women.
Right.
And then omni is spelled for those not familiar, OMNI. So putting it all together, homoflexible, omni, aromantic, asexual. Or short, aromantic, asexual can be shortened to aro A. But some people don't know what aro A is.
Shorten it to what?
Like the whole thing. Huh?
Aro S? Aro A.
Aro A, yeah. Aro, like that's aro for aromantic, and then ace for asexual. If I wanted to be short, I could say homosexual, omni, aro, ace. But like I'm careful with who I say it because some people aren't familiar with the short name. So I have to make sure I clarify that.
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm in love. I'm in love with this whole process. I am. like, why did it take so long?
Yeah, I feel so.
I'm so grateful for your generation. Yes, Farah.
It's like, and Ro and I are 10 years apart. We're not like, there's not that many generations between us, right? But I still, listening to Ro, I'm just like Z is like, I can do this. Like every time they add on one another descriptor to their identity, it's like that affirmation of I can do this, and it just makes me smile, to like
exactly
to insist right upon like owning your identity in such a specific way. And I feel like I'm so grateful, like just to hear it, because like I feel like I'm still unpacking the baggage from my generation, and it's lovely. And I can talk about my identity, or we can talk about Eurydice, wherever you want to go.
Yes, please. You can talk about your identity. I did. I'll take a moment because I wanted to share a thought that I had. The thought that came to me is that language works by creating difference. there is no other there is no other way. So the reason we're even in this like long-standing binary construct made of binary terms is that that's how language as we know it has been given to us. You know, there is the thing and its opposite, and you can say that everything contains its opposite, but as you speak you're not able to express that, because you know you're going to say something and it will most likely be perceived as the opposite of something else. So we understand things more by what they're not, or what they're not allowed to be, than, you know, by what they actually are, their essence. So I feel that, you know, there is definitely an act of resistance, a revolutionary act in choosing not to go down that path. And even though you're only able to speak for yourself, and don't feel that, you know, you can speak for everyone, you know, living by as an example and kind of like spreading this as an option for everyone, I feel is a kind of linguistic evolutionary step, right? Because, you know, you model how we can take pretty much anything, even though in this case it's pronouns, and 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 change it enough to take it out of that, you know, binary setup. That is how meaning has been constructed for us all. And yes, it's uncomfortable, because like but yeah, but like if you stop and think about it, I must have been uncomfortable when we were like 2 and 3, that we had to learn and memorize those specific sounds as meanings, you know, the specific meanings that we were told they had to mean, or else we would not be understood, or we might have been punished. So that discomfort already happened. It just happened at the time that we don't quite remember, because we didn't articulate then the way we articulate now. We weren't trained. Right? It was like before we were trained. So if we agree that the system, you know, is created to facilitate the you know, the prosperity and the well-being of the few, and is you know, unjust because it's not inclusive, then we gotta kind of go to that beginning and say, well, that was a place of discomfort. So if it feels uncomfortable to have to insist on this, and to have to ask to be respected, and to have to, you know, change the way we communicate, this is why. And this is why it matters. And this is the work that we're doing. And that's why I personally, you know, respect it so much. That's how I perceive it, and that's why I respect it. So yes, Farah, would you like to speak to us about your orientation and, you know, pronoun choices, anything else?
Yeah, no, I really wanted to just hone in on something that everyone's touching up on, and it's erasing difference, you know, and how the dominant logos and dominant language does that. And so I think at this point in my life, you know, I used to be I want to be friends and be in relationship with people across differences, and I don't want my difference to be erased. And so that's my intention now with my language. And so, for example, for my identity, like I used to say like, oh, like I like, just don't label me, you know? But the thing is, when you say, don't label me sexually, don't label me gender wise, right? And my gender identity, my orientation and my identity, you get erased, you know? Because it's just, in one sense, it's freedom, because you're not like making yourself fit into any specific designation or box, right? But at the same time, you're not seen in an affirmative way. You're taken to be seen or framed in like a very moment to moment a moment to moment picture, right? And then where's the continuity, or where's the framing that like others kind of need in order to see you fully? So like, for example, right now, I like to speak about my gender first, my gender identity as a non-binary person. I've had so much gender dysphoria just being, because especially now at this point, when I get stressed, whatever, my body becomes a lot more quote unquote, just curvy, and it tends to make me be read more as like a woman, and I, in the beginning of my gender journey, there was a lot of just dysphoria against, like, I saw myself in my mind, and the way that I like to present was always more boyish, more just, it was really funny. I have like a little story. I was seeing an intuitive therapist at the time, which, someone that deals with the spiritual world. And she told me, and she functions with a binary, and she's like, I want you to, in one of the exercises, I want you to draw yourself as you see yourself. And so I did that drawing, and she's like, you don't look like you have a gender. You look like an alien. Like, when she's like, we need to correct this. And I was like, and she's a lovely,
that's the word, correct. That's the word.
Yes.
That's what, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
She was like,
that's the dreaded, that's the dreaded word. Yeah.
You got to discipline this. You got to get this into shape.
Yeah.
And, I felt like there was something wrong with me. I was like, oh, because I don't want to
take you to correction facility.
The gender correction facility.
That's right.
And and so, and then I was dating also at the time a trans man, who also and just identified as a trans man, like used he, him pronouns, was completely like passing as a male, a cis male, from in a public way. And so I was just like, I also don't see myself as this, like as wanting to, in the binary, to seeing myself as a man, And I mean, that's a lot to unpack too, but that's as much as I can say within like the limits that we have, right? Like, I don't see myself as also this like static identity.
Yeah.
This static presentation.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like to tell other people what is the correct way to,
no.
to go about presenting their gender.
Yeah.
If they need to have, surgery, if they, and that's that. I believe like everybody has their own gender journey. I'm still wanting to get on hormones at this point in my life. At the very least, but that doesn't, I don't think that determines, like,
right, yeah,
like that this is going to be my presentation as like the guy from GQ, like on the cover of GQ, right? Like, nah, like, I'm not going for that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, and so like, I guess, so I do assert, I guess this is all to say, a long story to say that I started doing drag. I guess doing drag really allowed me to step outside of my everyday presentation and really ask myself to be creative with my gender. Like Rosen has been like alluding to, like, and you have too, you're to see like, this is a creative act. I get to be creative in the way I move in the world, in the way that I speak in the world, in the way that I'm embodied. Like, I want to create it. And so when I started doing drag back in 2016 was the first time I was like, you know what, I'm going to do a drag show. And it was Miami's Wigwood 2016 was like the first one. And I was like, all right, I'm down. And I ended up doing a 30 minutes like performance art almost, where I didn't even script the whole thing. I had a scripted playlist, but I didn't like have everything choreographed at all. Like I had my props, I had my audience, and I was having a conversation with them, with the songs, with my invocations to them, right, to come up on the stage to help me with, you know, this book, with this song, with being vulnerable, about what my identity was, and I was forming a language for it there as Fluid Dude. Fluid Dude was my drag name at the time, and it was the most, I can't even begin to tell you, to be witnessed and to be creative with a receiver on the other end was like it really it asked me to insist upon my identity, but also to practice it in real time. And so that's when I was more sure. I was like, you know what? Like, I really do feel like there is a lot of dude about me that doesn't, you know, because we live in a patriarchal society, I'm not allowed to inhabit this fluid space between, you know, Farah, who you're speaking to, and like this other person that is with me, you know. And that can't come out because we live in capitalism with all this transactions and just get to the point, you know, you know, gotta survive, and like there's not enough creative space for us, you know.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like what cookies are we tracing? What do you buy consistently?
Yes.
You know, what goods do you produce? That's it.
What's your career? What's your profession? Like,
How do you command social respect?
Yes. Right. What's your status? What's your status?
That's it. Your status. Yeah. Oh yeah. Ouchie. That relationship status.
Exactly. Oh yeah. Like I don't define myself by like my romantic relationships. Like
I can't even imagine that ever answering that.
Yeah, you know, but as far as my attractions and stuff, you know, I am not heterosexual. I would say Rosen kind of introduced me to this concept because I never felt like bisexual did the term, but being M-spec, which is like multisexual, right, Rosen, you can and so I think that for me is my attraction is, you know, is queer. It's just like, you know, and I can't tell you what body it's going to come in and what, you know, but I know that I'm just not attracted, I know for sure, in a very traditional sense, to like the ideal of whatever a heterosexual partner is. So, yeah. That one was far shorter and easier because I just feel like that's the best I can do right now. I've had partners that are both, you know, cis women, cis men, and then gender queer, gender fluid, trans. So I feel like it wouldn't be fair to just like they go all over the spectrum. So I think M-spec captures it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love it. Yeah, I think I probably am that too.
Me and Rosen have been doing a lot of panels lately, and
that's great.
I think I keep on having to bring up. Maybe Ro can speak a little about this. I'm curious to hear to hear Z talk about this, about homonormativity in the queer scene, because people are making it interchangeable, where homo means queer, but it's so much more.
Exactly.
So
yes,
and then the normative. So maybe Ro or
Ro, please.
Yes. So homonormativity is this idea and also these actions that seems to not team that actually does prioritize certain behaviors and identities. So homonormativity, like think about like how are queer people, or well, we say queer, but really gay people depicted in the media. A lot of times it's white, cisgender, monosexual, gay men. So monosexuals and only attracted to one gender. So cisgender, monosexual, gay men, white, young, like living in the suburbs, they got married, adopted a kid, white picket fence. And that tends to be the depiction of people in our community. That's not most of our community. That's not at the end of the that's scary. The idea of homonormativity is that for straight people, that they like that palatability. Like those are the only thing that they're gonna accept. And if you don't fit that description, they're not gonna accept you. And then people within our community, the LGBTQ community, unfortunately, instead of using their privilege and betraying that privilege and being accomplices to other identity liberation, they take that privilege and they're like, okay, and they throw all of the rest of us under the bus, which is really unfortunate, especially the more marginalized people. So people attracted to multiple genders, like MSFREG people of color. Like, and in my case, I'm an MSFREG person of color, like specifically Black, Indian, and Indigenous Jamaican. And like, I don't fit that mold whatsoever. I'm also polyamorous, so I can be attracted to multiple people at once. But especially us who deviate from that homonormativity in multiple ways, that basically society further marginalizing us, even within our community, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, I feel the same. I feel that this is how it happens. No matter what, we look back at our history of resistance, and whether it's civil rights, women's rights, and of course gender rights. It's the same. It comes to the same. Basically, the overall system. The systemization, the tendency to systemize, takes over and appropriates whatever the struggle is. So you have like a wave of feminism, and then women get the right to vote, but they still have to vote like basically either Republican or Democrat. And the first woman who runs for president is Hillary Clinton. And I'm not gonna politicize this. I don't have to. We all know what I'm saying, right? So there are no choices except to normatize yourself more and more and more and more in that kind of like empowerment that you have been given. We have the first president of color, and we don't even get universal health care. We don't even close down Guantanamo. I mean, the list is long, but I'll stop here because we know what we're saying. So it seems that it always stops at the not even performative level, at like the tokenist level, right? And then we're done. We're done with that. We're we're post-feminist, and now we're post-racial, and now we're post-gender, and everybody like get back to work. So it feels that by taking this, we win these little victories, and when we give up on the the actual battle that we were fighting, and 10, 20 years down the line, we are faced with the consequences, which basically, if you put aside the details, the consequences are not much has changed, So, women, like married women weren't allowed to have bank accounts, for example, until like, a generation ago. And then, they got to like get paid by their husbands, if their husbands were well off, for being, housewives, for being for raising the children. So you get alimony. So in a sense, this helps. The people who have no income don't get anything from it, and then the tiny minority who are very well off, have countless ways to get around it. Plus, they use it to, once again, right, objectify and commodify, and trophy the female body. So in a sense, the woman is lewd doesn't change, right? And I feel that, like gay marriage was important as a victory, but if we feel that, okay, now we got it, then, in the end, actually it's an assimilation channel. It's yet another way to be assimilated. And also it's a way for, the normative, the dominant culture to present itself as enlightened. We are so inclusive and accepting now. Because we like, don't put you, in jail or don't like banish you from work mostly, and like making money because of what you do in the privacy of your home. So but yeah, it's important to kind of every step of the way, not be satisfied with the crumbs, to kind of be conscious of where we are overall. And how much further we want to go, and how do we go? We definitely don't get to the next stage by, declaring like victory. Yeah, it's tiny little. It feels to me, on from the point of view of like liberation, tiny little steps out of the prison. Maybe one step forward, one back, two forward, one back, kind of a little dance like that. Yeah. So, what you're speaking to, and I feel you practice, is so useful because it makes this real on a moment-to-moment daily basis. So it makes it much harder to kind of like, feel that you're done or feel reassured, or like kind of like turn your attention away to other normative things, because it's something that you're doing on a daily basis. You're introducing and reintroducing yourself and asking those around you, new people you meet, to experience this and think about it for themselves. So it's like a checking in with yourself and your identity and your consciousness continuously, rather than saying, okay, this is the goal, I got this goal, and once like I achieve this, I'm done, right? So I feel that that's, the great like, let's say, improvement in the methodology. It's only when the practice of resistance includes a daily check-in, a daily practice, that we have some sort of like assurance that we're going to, continue, that we'll keep on it.
Yeah, I think.
Say,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I feel like, I don't feel, but we definitely lack intersectionality in how we do life, and even more importantly, how we act. Like, I know you mentioned like Hillary Clinton as like the first woman president candidate, but that's actually not completely true. Like, even when people say Shirley Chisholm, she was the first Black woman elected to the U.S. Congress, and then then people during the time of Hillary Clinton and her candidacy, they're like, oh, how actually Shirley Chisholm, this Black woman, and her parents are Caribbean, specifically. Like her dad is from Guyana, at that point British Guyana, and her mom is from Barbados. So she's Guyanese and Bayesian, but she was born in the United States. And people were saying to be intersectional, using that intersectionality framework. And intersectionality, the term was coined by Professor Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, like a Black feminist legal scholar, basically saying that considering people's different identities and how that shapes a unique experience, especially relating to oppression. So they'll say, okay, Shirley Chisholm was actually the first woman, but that's also not go back you have to go back even further. So sometimes they use specific. Is okay, first of a major party, and as you were saying, like, why is it like Democrat or Republican? So like in the case of Shirley and of Hillary, they're a Democrat, but there was actually a woman even way before her, like her, which I just looked up, Victoria Woodhull. So she was in the Equal Rights Party in 1872, and she was a presidential candidate, but we don't hear about her. And I feel like, and that's one of the problems. Like a lot of times in our analyses, and like when we look at history, like we really don't consider the historical continuity. It's like very insular in our thinking. And as we talk about language, that also goes and is very interconnected also to in language. So people, the dictionaries, thankfully for the most part, are going away from it, but people tend to think of this dictionaries as prescriptive, as in they tell us, okay, how should we write, how should we think, but really they need to be descriptive. Like, how do we actually talk? How do we actually think? How do we write? And be that way. And when we get into that descriptive language, then language is allowed more, because language does evolve. People act like, oh, we're just making up words. Well, yeah, words don't just fall from the sky. We make them up.
Yeah, someone made them up.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And then when we talk about pronouns, it's go back to historical continuity. Like, you say you use the term neopronouns. So like my pronouns, the and there, it's called a neopronoun because it's outside of she and he. But a lot of times, a lot of these pronouns outside of she and he aren't that new. Like if you look back like 1800s and even earlier, you will see these pronouns, and maybe they weren't, and just because they're not used as often anymore, that doesn't make them new. Just because you don't know them, that does not make them new. And like even look at, I remember I had a project and I got into it like with my linguistic professor, and I was telling her my pronouns, and she was misgendering me, so I didn't know it. And I was correcting her, and we got into talking about pronouns. She was talking about language, or she was saying that, oh, there's certain things you can change the language, certain things you can't change. And she was claiming you can't change pronouns. I know that's false. Like when you look at the history, I'm like, well, the pronoun he was before the pronoun she. So before they say he, before like whether you were man, woman, non-binary, like they use the pronoun he, and that's very patriarchal structure as like men being the default. And unfortunately, there's still people to this day who still use he, like in legal documents and think that's all inclusive. For the most, and it's not. You can't just refer to everyone as he. But for the most part, people are generally going to the idea, okay, yeah, you can't refer to everybody as he. But then they're still stuck using he and she. I'm like, for the most part, people aren't calling she a neo-pronoun. But the she didn't always exist, was he, and then she came on later as women, like, well, it's not linear. Again, history isn't linear, because there were, especially in indigenous cultures, where women had various positions, were revered, different positions of power, and then especially Eurocentrism with really Eurocentrism and imperialism imposed misogyny in various cultures. So going from that and then to women, specifically white women, going into the public sphere, and we can refer to as she, and we can't just refer to everyone as he, so they have he and she, and then now, not now, but we're again realizing there are more ways to refer to people, because there are different types of people, and people act like this is new, but language evolves over time, and sometimes it's not even an evolution, it's just like re-remembering, re-finding, rediscovering, these have already existed and people know about it. And a lot of times, and unfortunately, especially when they're people of color, women of color, they're not binary, they're not given credit.
Yeah, absolutely. So true. And lots and lots of people have not gotten credit through history. And yeah, I feel that, naming in particular is so arbitrary. Like if you think of it, even in my case, and I am contemporary in a sense, but my name is the name of my last name, which is my father's last name, because theoretically he owned me when I was born, so I belonged to him. So I had his first name was my middle name. His name is George. So my name when I was born, as it is for all children in Greece, is Eurydice, George, meaning implying of George, and then Cambyses, his last name, which happens to be the name of an ancient Persian king who went mad. But my point is, when I went to try to conquer Egypt and went insane, Farah, of course.
Yeah.
Like, why would you try to do that? But anyway, when I went to English school, so English was my third language. So after I got my back in French, I studied English on the island of Crete. And like this, the lady who taught me English, who was born and raised in Crete, had her own understanding of translating things like names. So he wrote my name in the way that she thought it sounded phonetically. And that's what I had to show that I had passed the TOEFL test, basically. So I went by that very arbitrary name spelling. That's not even how my own, father or uncles or sisters spell our last name. My whole academic career after that, because I needed that paperwork, right? Which is reminiscent of like so many of our, recent or further removed ancestors coming to this country in all kinds of ways, whether it's like through Ellis Island or, as slaves or whatever, and given completely arbitrary names, shortened names, normative names, or willingly changing names in order to not be, censored or face, discriminated against. So yeah, naming, which is part of what the pronouns are, has always been arbitrary, especially in this like multilingual world we live in, where we're constantly, trying to translate each other's, complex inherited genetic, lineages in like common languages, in languages that are not our native ones. So I feel that, that happens. It's just that when it doesn't happen with intention, it doesn't seem to bother anyone. when it doesn't include our own intentionality, then it's like, oh, well, yeah, that's what happens. It's life, right? Because we are disempowered in the process. So that's more acceptable somehow socially than when we're the ones doing the naming. Yeah. But I feel that, as I said before, it's in fact, very respectful of the audience, of the listener, of the companion, of the coworker, because it shows that, what we take time to care, not just about ourselves and how, we may be perceived, but about their understanding it, their participation in it. And I also appreciate, the effort to be clear, lucid, and specific about your, preferences in your orientation. Because again, we traditionally, especially as women, have been thrown this, kind of like huge construct of romance and all the things that we should naturally, give up in exchange for like being, romantically wanted and approved, and kind of like fixed. So being able to even say, I have an aesthetic attraction, and that's it, right? I find that so liberating in its specificity, as compared to like, well, I'm attracted to someone physically, therefore I'm in love, therefore Cinderella, or, whatever like the normative childhood scenarios that come up with you, Romeo and Juliet, right? So like a whole echo of all that comes, into your consciousness, and you're not even aware. So yeah, the gift of linguistic specificity is exactly that we are able to, take a moment to allow ourselves to, to separate our truth from like the overall nonstop running, narrative that has its own interest, in like propaganda and for propaganda purposes. Yeah.
systemization, as
Right.
you said, or in the normative, interests of, our oppressors.
Exactly. Yeah.
Of the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And those who run it, because I feel that a lot of what happens is not so much a matter of like government, is a matter of capitalism and the accumulation of capital, and those who are running those systems, who I feel unfortunately must be kind of like far removed from their humanity. I mean, I don't know many of them personally, or maybe any of them personally.
Say that again, that they're destroying our humanity?
No, I feel that they are divorced from their own humanity, that
in their own
even though I don't know them personally, I can only imagine that they are divorced from their humanity, because if they came from a humanitarian existence, they would probably find it very hard to quantify everything and understand it in terms of profit margins or logistics, or all those ways of turning life into spreadsheet. Yeah. They need the most love, if that's the word.
They need the love and the curiosity about other, other ways of being.
Yeah. So I hope, I also wanted to say that, I hope that you find ways to, follow and practice your career and your work outside academia. Because I feel that that's been another, way that, at least in recent decades, the overall, structure, the patriarchy has found to kind of like isolate voices of difference. When the only job you can find basically with benefits is in academia, then everybody speaks to each other. And in the overall culture, we are stigmatized as elite, and as like not being in touch with the people, and it becomes a little too esoteric or rarefied. At least it's viewed that way. So the discourse and the exchange loses some of its loses a lot of its effect and power, in the social arena. And as a writer, I have found that to be true very much about writing, and creative writing. We kind of like tend to, replicate what can get published, which can get us like a job in the system, which then can get us, another publication, and maybe a promotion, and then of course, like the great white whale of tenure. So like kind of like at least being conscious of finding ways to practice, to work, to belong, to join, that are in the daily existence of the people, and not in like the ivory tower of academia. I think is important as part of being an activist.
Yeah, I was just gonna add Eurydice to that in the beginning when we were introduced, you mentioned that I was in FIU's MFA program, but I actually
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. But I left at first the MFA, because of a medical leave that I took, I was trying to figure out what was going on with my health, with my immune system. And then I had the option of returning, but it was calling to me to more so like study environmental justice and in the frame of literature. And, and I just never could bring myself to go back to the MFA, because I very much this feeling of normalizing and creating like a very specific voice that's going to get me into publications. It felt like, since that, like you said, the great white whale of publication and tenureship was like the end all be all, I really found a lot more freedom of thoughts in just, creating my own thesis that didn't, and having the resources to just kind of spend time with the books and the literatures, right? That were more activist oriented. And what I'm doing right now is focusing on like, what is an activist poetics?
Yeah.
And how do they deal with the violences? How do they address violence from cultural to environmental? And so I think that allows me to be much more exploratory than what it, like, I don't know, a traditional MFA program. And yeah, I definitely have my feet on the ground as far as like resistance and struggling. I'm definitely very all of my I try to have a praxis, of the theories that I encounter and my own, and translate it into action, which is really why I'm so happy Rove started the Rainbow Rights Pack, because it's even though it's like a new org, there's still a lot of it's just to have that community there, to that coalition to just kind of galvanize, right, especially now.
Part of what we can do is to set up collectives or groups to make an effort to like come together, even if it is like this on Zoom or on the phone, once a week, and also find ways to enter the system of production, content production, and the same way that we can kind of like create our identity, we can create the content, we can affect, right, the content that's being shared, and there is really no other way. Gotta make it all accessible as possible. So we so more and more people who feel like this and haven't perhaps been exposed to the different languages and possibilities, right, get that access. Yeah. So thank you for joining me. Thank you so much for this conversation. I hope we have another soon. And it was a pleasure getting to know you, Ro, and thank you, Farah, so much. And everyone out there, thank you for listening to us, and until next week, keep speaking sex. If I could make love incessantly, I would be God.